This conference will now be recorded.
And here we are. So this is what we are talking about in the yesterday's session. We were trying to look at how do you achieve something known as a downtime deployment. So we said that if you have an application and if you want to do deployments to your applications, then you will or you could be using something called as deployment slots. And a deployment slots gives you a capability to make sure that you take your code directly not to the production but into a slot which replicates production or which replicates your actual application. So you're just creating another application, you're just replicating it into the slot, or you're just replicating that particular application as a slot, and you're taking the code and just deploying it into the slot. That's it. That's the only thing that you're doing. And finally, once your applications are ready, or once your slot is ready and that is tested, you can do a swap. So swap makes sure that the code that is there in your slot goes into the application or goes into the main application, and the code that is there in the main application is actually brought back into the slot. So this is what the concept of slot really is. Now I have one more feature, or I have one more use case scenario out here. Let's imagine that you have created this application out here, and let's say that you have a user or you have multiple users actually connecting to it, not just one. You'll have multiple users out here. So let me just bring it down. And let's imagine that this web app is hosting the code of arctc.co.in. And in the backend, this application is being supported by a virtual machine. Or this virtual machine is something that we are calling as the app service plan. This VM right now is something that we are calling as the app service plan out here, which actually powers your applications, which actually gives the RAM, the capacity, and all for your applications and extra. And let's imagine that I am on a plan called S1, which let's say gives me 1.75 GB of memory, somewhere around 100 of total ACUs, or I'm rather more interested in the ACU, Azure Compute Units. It gives you somewhere around 100 total ACUs and extra. This is what it really gives you. This is the capacity what it really gives you out here and extra. Now, let's imagine that yes, this has the IRCTC code. People are able to log into your website, and we are able to go ahead, or I as a user, I'm able to go ahead and let's say book my tickets and do my journey and all that stuff. So I'm booking my tickets and everything. This is good enough, but now you are handling this project for the IRCTC. I mean, you're handling the project for Government of India. Now government comes up with a special scheme called Tatkal, where you can book your tickets online between the 9 to 11 window and etc. And we are seeing a lot of traffic during this 9 to 11 period. Normally this is what happens, right? When you have that particular window, you actually have a lot of people who are actually visiting the website and making the ticket booking and all that stuff. Now what I thought, or what when I designed this application, what I thought is that this S1 plan on which the application service is actually running would be sufficient. I thought this, but turns out that during that 9 to 11 window and during the weekends and during festival seasons, a lot of traffic, or I am able to see there is a lot of spike in the traffic. There's like literally, a very heavy spike in the traffic out there. So instead of 1,000 users, there are like about 10,000 users per second who are visiting my particular website. This is the issue that I right now have. And what's happening right now is that since there are 10,000 users who are parallelly, trying to book tickets and, parallelly trying to make reservations and etc., there is a lot of load on the application. So that's the reason, right? Sometimes when you try booking your ticket and when you go to the payment gateway and try to do your payment, you kind of get a 404 error. Especially this happens when, during the Tatkal window. This used to happen a lot during the Tatkal window when you're trying to use irctc.co.in. I don't see that happening, these days because they have like improved the website and etc. But earlier when the website was launched, when you're trying to book the tickets and everything, when you're going to the payment gateway, it will kind of throw a lot of errors, right? That the payment is not successful and a lot of things that your payment has been declined and a lot of things out there. The only reason that I could think of that happening is because the total 100 ACUs that are allocated to this particular website using this particular virtual machine in the backend is not really sufficient to handle the traffic, because this 100 ACUs only designed for handling, let's say, about 100 users per a second. This is what I have designed the website for, and this is how the website is actually designed. So it's only 100 users per a second out here. But right now I am looking at 10,000 users per second, and this memory or this RAM or this power that is allocated to the app service by the backend virtual machine is not really sufficient. That's where you find all these issues out here. So especially during this period, I am able to observe this issue. So one possible solution that I can give to the IRCTC guys is that, you know what, you are at S1. Can you please scale yourself up to, let's say, something like P1 V1, which will give you, let's say, about 400 ACUs. Just giving you a random number. Let's say give you 400 ACUs, 7 GB or 8 GB of RAM, and this 400 ACUs will be able to basically help you out to take this capacity, help you out to consume this capacity, and make sure that your applications are up and running. Now, the first thing any client would ask is that what is the cost that I incur when I go from S1 to P1 V1? Now, S1, as you saw yesterday, would cost you somewhere around 5,000 rupees, around 5,000. So it's around 5,200 or something like that. And P1 V1 is costing you somewhere around 11,000 rupees. It's more than double. So government says, okay, fine, I'll pay this amount. You can give me the 400 ACU, so you can give me the 400 ACU capacity and everything. But what if, I mean, what during the off hours, wherein there are only 100 users per minute or 100 users per second? Meaning, apart from this 9 to 11, or apart from weekends, or apart from festival seasons, I do not see so much of traffic. So, should I again come back to S1 back again? Because I am paying around 11,000 only for only for these hours. But for the remaining hours, I do not really have that much of traffic. I'm not consuming it. Then Azure tells you that, okay, fine, if you're still not consuming it, you will still pay the base amount for this particular price, or you'll still pay the base amount for this particular plan, which is 11,000. Meaning, let's compare it to a very physical world. You've taken a, let's say, a 2 BHK apartment, and there were a lot of relatives that are coming to your place. So, thinking about that, what you did is that you went ahead and took a 3 BHK apartment. Now, all the relatives are gone, and now you go ahead and ask the owner that, you know what, uh, is it okay if I can pay you only for the 2 BHKs or only for the 2 rooms because the third room is not being used? It's the same way in the cloud. So, this is not allowed, right? if you're going on a P1 V1, if you are scaling yourself up or if you're scaling your plan up from S1 to P1 V1, you'll start incurring or you'll start getting those costs out there. But is there any other solution that I can think of to accommodate these users without having to scale my plan up? This is important. I need to make sure that only during the peak hours this plan will still support. I still get charged. I don't get charged, let's say 11,000. I should get charged somewhere lesser than 11,000 depending upon my consumption and depending upon the number of users. This is where a concept called auto scaling comes into picture. What exactly do I mean by auto scaling out here is that especially during this time window, during the 9 to 11 kind of season or during the festival season, etc., I want to temporarily add virtual machines in the backend because one virtual machine is not sufficient. So I'd like to temporarily add VMs in the backend which can take this request and which can accommodate this traffic. That's the only thing that I want to do. This can be achieved using this auto scaling concept. So what will happen is that now you do not have to scale up from S1 to P1 V1. You do not have to do this. So you're still on the base price of 5,000 rupees. Would you be charged for these machines? Definitely yes, because you are scaling out. But this charge will only imply or this charge will only occur during this hour where you are using it. And during the unused times or during let's say the times that you're not using it, you can eliminate these machines and get your charge down. So this is completely based on your usage. This is totally based on your usage. It's not like you're paying for ideal CPU time during the non-off hours and etc. This is where auto scaling as a concept actually helps us. Auto scaling as a concept basically actually comes into picture, and this is like kind of important, guys, because I've seen a lot of organizations implement auto scaling and etc. So we will have to understand how do you implement auto scale, how do you create auto scales and etc. and what is the significance of it. So this is the theory of it, guys. So any questions till here, guys? Anyone, anything till here that I can take before we get started with the practical? Anyone, any questions? Okay, so let's get started then. So I'll just go ahead create a resource group for myself as I did yesterday. I'll just name it as auto scale or something like that. So I'll say auto scale RG. Let's create it in ECUS. I'll say review and create this out. And let me go ahead and create the app service. I'll say create. And I'll say scale app service ECUS. So just giving a unique name. Just giving or just taking, let's say, the runtime stack out here. I'll just say that this is ECUS. Say I'll just create a new plan here called sample plan 1. And as of now, I'm just creating the plan F1 because I don't have an option to change this to any other capacity because I am using a free trail account. So let's go to deployment. Let's disable this out and let's disable the monitoring also. Let's review and create. So let's wait for one quick second. So this is what we'll be doing. So we'll create a basic app service plan, and we'll see what is the plan that can support auto scaling, because not every plan that you have there can support auto scaling out there. And let's see how do you implement and what are the various varieties of auto scale that you do have, and let's see them in action. Let's try to see them in action. Let's see if you can auto scale things out and etc. So let's give it 2 more minutes out here to go ahead and create the app service, and let's go and let's get into it once it's created. Any questions till here, guys? Anyone, anything till here? Okay, so I'm inside the app service plan. I mean, inside the app service. So in once getting into the app service, right? So let's go. I'll just scroll down, and there is something known as a scale up and scale out. There are two things out here. Until now, we've been going into scale up here, and we were trying to, let's say, scale our application out or scale our application up from one plan to the other. So if you're changing the plan, it's called, or if you're going from one plan to a higher plan, it is called a scale up action. If you're coming down from a higher plan to a lower plan, it's called scale down. So scale up and down is related to the plan. So if you change your plan, it means a scale up action. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing a scale up action, and I'm trying to check for a plan which supports something known as scaling. And it says B1, yes, I can support up to, I can manual scale you up to, let's say, 3 instances subject to the availability. So I'll say okay. I'll just take a plan called B1 because this supports the scaling condition out here. So let me take this out, and let's see what we get here. So as and when I do this, I just go down, and there is something called scale out as well. Now scale out and scale in. You won't change the plan, but you're trying to increase the backend instances. These are called instances in the backend that are running, nothing but virtual machines, but Azure just calls them as instances out here. So rather than changing a plan, you're trying to accommodate the load, you're trying to accommodate the traffic by using this particular concept called scaling, and you're trying to increase the backend instances out here so that your requests can be diverted internally to the three virtual machines and they can handle it. This is what you're doing, and this is what you have right now. It says it's a manual scale, and it says the instance count as of now is 1. So I'll say okay, fine, take me to somewhere around 3. I'll just save. It says okay, fine, the region has only 1 capacity out here. So the issue with this is that I do not have a lot of capacity to scale out, because uh, the region that I'm using, or let's say the plan that I'm using, and also the account that I'm using, can only support 1 instance out here, meaning there is 1 instance that is running in the backend. I cannot really scale this out. I cannot really go to a higher instance capacity out here, because any region that you take will not support more than 1 instances out here. The reason being, this is a free trail account, so this won't really support out here. But what will happen here is that as and when I hit 3 and just say save, there would be 3 virtual machines that will be running in the backend on the same plan each. So S1, S1, and S1, and whatever request is coming to your web app. So how will the request come in? Normally when the user clicks this button out here, let's come back. Normally, whenever the users tells you browse, they'll hit this particular application, and let's imagine that this is the front end application that we do have out here. So whenever the user hits this particular web page, the traffic will be internally load balanced. I'm talking about the load balancer right now. So behind the scene, you will be having something known as a load balancer. You are not managing this load balancer right now. Microsoft is taking care of it. Microsoft is understanding what is the traffic, what are the instances, and how do I divert it. So you will have a load balancer internally, and this load balancer is going ahead and diverting your requests to the available pool of instances that are running in the backend. This is how scaling actually works out here. So the request is coming in, you will have a load balancer that is setting in the backend. You cannot manage it, you cannot even see it. Microsoft manages this out because this is a PaaS service and it's a managed service out here. And once it hits the load balancer will know how many instances are running in the backend, and then you're accordingly diverted, or the traffic is accordingly diverted out here. So this is the entire concept of scaling, guys. So any questions till here? Anyone, anything till here? Anyone, anything?
So if we scale down it, so the VM
Mm-hmm.
will be automatically created, or is it that we'll have to manually create the VM there?
No, not at all. So the virtual machines that are there in the backend is completely managed by Azure. So all these, right, the virtual machines that are running are IaaS services. These are infrastructure as a service. So we do not have to create it. We are not even touching the virtual machine, meaning we are not even allowed to touch the virtual machine that is running in the backend. All we are playing around is at this layer. So we are just ordering Microsoft that, you know what, instead of one instance, or instead of, let's say, one VM that is running in the backend, give me like three. I mean, in my case, I won't be able to scale it out. I'm just telling that, you know what, Microsoft, just give me three out here. And the creation of these machines in the backend that are running in the backend are taken care completely by the platform, or are taken care completely by the service provider, in our case, Azure. So Microsoft is responsible now to give you all these, resources and handle them, make sure that the traffic is going to them. All you are handling is this level. So all this is the IaaS layer. This is the infrastructure as a service layer. This is the PaaS layer. So everything beyond this line is handled by Microsoft. So we are not going to create all these things out. It will automatically get created for us. Does it answer your question?
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Great, these are automatically getting created for me. I'm happy, but again, I only need three instances running in the backend during the 9 to 11 window and during the festival season. And I don't want this to happen, or I don't want three instances to, kind of run in the backend after this particular period. So I am in something known as manual scale. So there should be a user who's monitoring in the backend, meaning there should be a user as an administrator like us who's managing all these things in the backend. And after 11, he should go ahead and, let's say, do or scale it down to one. Whenever there is a festival season, he has to come here, scale it up to, three, or scale it out to three rather. So he has to do this job. He's now, or we are now, kind of acting like a lift operator, wherein you are, according to the client's requirement, you are trying to, kind of balance this out. But this is not accurate, right? Because I might miss the time. I don't even know when there is a spike. I don't even know what kind of a traffic that I'm dealing with. I don't even know when the festival season is starting. So all this is, let's say, a management headache that I don't want to actually go ahead and manually scale things out. Rather, it would be great if there is something or if something can help me to automatically scale these applications out depending upon the load or depending upon the capacity and etc. That's where something called as custom auto scales as a concept comes into picture. Now, this is what we did till now was a manual auto scaling. Now I'm talking about something known as custom auto scale or automatic auto scaling. What exactly is this concept? Is that in order to explain this concept, the plan B1 that we kind of scaled out doesn't support this out. Now, if you see B1, the plan B1 that I just scaled up to can only support manual scale a maximum of 3 instances, meaning you can have a maximum of 3 virtual machines that are running in the backend. Apart from that, you cannot go for a higher level of things. So let me go and scale myself up to S1. And if I just scroll down, it says auto scale, not a manual scale, up to 10 instances subject to the availability. Let's say apply. And there is one terminology that you need to observe, guys. Microsoft is clearly telling that it's subject to the availability, meaning I can only scale these applications if there are virtual machines available with me. If there are no virtual machines available with me, then I'm sorry, you'll have to wait. But normally this doesn't happen. You will have instances according to the way you order it out. So I now scale my application up to a plan called S1. I am now able to see that there is something called as auto scaling, and I can go for up to 10 instances out here. So I'll say scale out. And now I'm able to see an option called custom auto scale, and it says scale on any schedule based on matrices. So what does this really mean? Let me go into this custom auto scale out here, and it asks me for a couple of things out here. So it firstly tells me what is the name of the auto scale. I'll say sample auto scale first demo. I'll say the resource group in which this needs to be created is something called Autoscale RG. You can select from, let's say, a number of resource groups. You can do that also. Then it's saying what is the auto scaling condition that you do have. Like what exactly are you, kind of looking, or what is the exact scenario that you do have. I'll say, yes, I want to scale based on a metric. What do you mean by a metric? Is let's come down and let's say add rules out here. So I am saying that please scale my application up if, let's say, the average CPU consumption, meaning you will have, as I said, you have a virtual machine in the backend that is running. This virtual machine has a CPU, and now I'm calling the CPU as 100 ACUs. Let's imagine that this is a CPU. So now I'm telling that if the if the average CPU consumption in the backend, if this exceeds 70 percentage, meaning whenever the consumption goes to 71, and if it continues to start increasing for the next 5 minutes. So I am telling my plan right now that you know what, if the CPU in the backend, or if let's say the memory utilization in the backend, which is 100 total ACU that is right now allocated to me, if you see that this is going beyond 71, and if you observe it consistently for the next 5 minutes, because sometimes what happens is that you can have unexpected spike for a minute, and it can also come down because for a minute there are a lot of users and a lot of stuff that is happening out there, and you can also come down out here. I mean, the request can also, or the CPU percentage utilization can also come down. In that cases, don't scale it out. Only in cases where you see that the duration is about 5 minutes. So what do you do? is that you increase the instance by, let's say, 1. Meaning, what I'm telling right now is that whenever you see there are 100 total SUs, they are exceeding like 70 or 71 or 72, something like that. Please allocate one more instance with 100 total SU right now. So that my load now can be distributed between these two things out. So right now I do not have 100 effectively. I have 200 ACUs, which can now handle all my requests. And I'm saying, okay, fine, increase the instance count by 1, meaning every time this happens, now your load balancing internally will check both the machines, will see the health of both the machines, and then accordingly scale my applications up. So I'm adding this rule and I'll say add this rule out. So I added a rule to scale out when. So if you see, check this out, it's telling scale out when the plan, meaning the backend virtual machine, the CPU consumption of the backend virtual machine is exceeding 70%. Meaning out of the 100 total ACU, if it's exceeding 70% for a period of 5 minutes, increase it by 1. Good enough. I also need to tell when to scale in. When do you destroy these machines? When do I don't need these machines? I don't need these machines when the CPU percentage is not 70. Or in other words, I can say when the CPU percentage is or the consumption is less than 70. Or let's say not exactly less than 70, but I want a safe window. So I'll say whenever the CPU consumption is less than, let's say, 50%, because after 50 I still need the instances to be in place. So I'll say, okay, fine, good. I'll add another rule out here based upon the CPU percentage again. But this time I will say if the CPU percentage is less than 50% utilization for a duration of, let's say, 10 minutes, I will decrease the count by 1. I will start removing my machines that are running in the backend. I'll say okay, add. And you can also set what is the minimum instances that you need, what is the default, and what is the maximum. For example, I need a minimum of 2 virtual machines, a minimum of 2 instances that are running in the backend, because uh, one virtual machine I feel even during the or even during the non-peak hours, even this one virtual machine is not able to support me. So I just need 2 virtual machines that are running in the backend at the same time. And the default is also 2. And I will say the maximum is, let's say, something like 8. The maximum that you can go for is 8, is what I am setting right now. And I am telling that by default have 2 instances, and scale in and scale out according to, let's say, the load that you have, or according to, let's say, the capacity that you have. That's it. This is what I'm kind of telling the system to do right now. And I can save, but of course I will get an error because I do not have so much of capacity to go for. So I can also show you that. So I'll just save this out and I should get an error telling that this is not supported and a lot of things out there. So this works best when you actually kind of take a pay as you go account, or when you have an enterprise account and etc. Normally for testing accounts, all these features are kind of in a disabled mode. It's saved, great. So it did save it out, but it might fail increasing the capacity, because I can only go for a maximum of 2 instances, or a maximum of 1 instance that is there in the backend. But it did save, but that's what is a bit surprising for me. But yes, so right now the plan, right now the auto scale conditions are saved. So my applications will now start monitoring it. In the backend, it will tell you that okay, fine, this is the CPU, this is the condition. So whenever there is an increase, whenever there is something like 71 ACUs that are being consumed in the backend instances, please add one more machine. By default, there will be two machines that are running in the backend. By default, this is the default condition. So irrespective of what your load is, irrespective of what your utilization is, by default, I need two instances that are running in the backend. But whenever you observe that the CPU percentage of the two machines are going beyond, so that's the reason this is called average. So this plus this by 2, if that is more than, or the utilization of this machine and this machine by 2, if this is more than, let's say, 70 percentage, then please go ahead, add a machine here. Now the rule will be like machine 1, machine 2, machine 3 by 3, taking the average of these three things. And now I'll now start calculating if the CPU percentage is greater than 70. If it is greater, if it's greater, then please go ahead and add one more thing. Now the average will be A plus B plus C plus D. So one to one, first machine, second machine, third machine, fourth machine. If the average consumption of them is greater than 70, then add one more. How many more I should add? A maximum of 8. After 8, I cannot add more. This is what I'm kind of telling the rule out here. And I am also saying that if the CPU consumption is not, or not greater than 70, or if it's less than 70, then start taking the machines out. Again, it'll start calculating the average. It'll see if the consumption is less than 70, so less than 50, sorry. It'll start taking all these things out. And by default, you'll have two. So you'll have two virtual machines that are helping you run in the backend. This is how the concept gets implemented, guys. And you not only have CPU percentage, you have different matrices that will help you out here. You can scale based on the data in, the data out, the memory percentage, not the CPU, but the memory, meaning the RAM. And there are a lot of things basically that you can use. But the most popular things that we use are data in, data out, memory percentage, CPU percentage, and so on. So this is the entire concept of auto scales, guys, and how do you apply that, and how do you kind of manage this, and etc. So any questions here, guys? Anyone, anything? Is this okay? Does anyone doesn't understand this? Is this okay?
Hello,
Yep. Please go, Shankar.
sir. With the plan, we have the 10 instances, right?
Hmm.
But in the instance limits for maximum, you are giving only 8. Why?
That's correct, because I mean the plan allows me to scale up to 10 instances. So if I look at the plan out here, if you look at the descriptions out here, a maximum up to 10 instances. Like you can scale maximum to 10 instances. The plan by default gives you one. You can go maximum up to 10 instances out here. But for my architecture, for my use case scenario, I'm good with 8. I don't want 10, because if it's exceeding 8, then I cannot really help because my budget is that much only.
Oh,
So I don't want to go for 10 instances that are running at the same time in the backend. So it just depends upon, I could have also put it 9 or 10 like that. But for just an example, I just put it at 8.
oh,
Meaning the maximum upper cap limit you can go for is 8. Anything below 8 is also okay, good. I mean, sorry, 10. Anything below 10 is also good enough. Any more questions here, guys? Any more, anything, anyone?
So the cost might be vary when you are adding and uh, set to be when you are upping and downing the
Yes.
VMs.
Yes, it is definitely going to vary. The reason being, you're adding multiple VMs of the same capacity, so the cost is definitely going to vary. but you are only going to incur cost, or you are only going to pay the cost for that time where you are consuming the instances in the backend.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank
But you will have the cost, yes.
you. Yes, thank you.
And if you look at this, right, it's now telling that I am working on a plan called S1 colon 1, meaning running on one instance. Now, even though I now set the default to 2, right? So if you look at this, if I come down to my condition, I set it to default to 2. I said I need a minimum of 2, a default of 2, but it's still running on one instance out here. The reason being, I do not have, or I rather in the free trial account, I cannot go beyond one. I cannot go beyond one instance out here. So that's the reason it's fixed at that number. But in a real time environment, when you put a minimum of 2, the plan should be like something like S1 colon 2 or S1 colon 3 if you have 3 instances that are running in the backend, or 3 instances that you want to manage in the backend. Good till here, guys. Any questions that I can take before we move forward? Anything? Anything on the auto scale part or the custom or the manual scale part? Anyone? Anything?
Kiran, I have one doubt.
Mhm.
Suppose traffic is more than 10 instance. So is there
Mhm.
any another option to increase the, like traffic? I mean like
Instances in the backend. So if it is more than, I mean, if your traffic needs more than 10 instances, then the only thing that you can do is scale your plan up. You have to make sure to scale your plan up, which will give you 20 instances. So S1 at the max supports only 10. But if
okay.
you still feel that, you know what, I cannot, I mean, 10 instances in the backend is actually a lot, because you're getting 1,000 ACU total, because one instance will give you somewhere around 100 total ACU. You're getting 1,000, I mean, you're getting 1,000 total ACU out here, which is a very big number. But even if this number is not really sufficient to handle the traffic, then you'll have to make sure to scale up your application, or meaning scale up your application out here, which will give you like about 20 instances out here. So you can go a maximum of 20 instances in this plan. So if the traffic is higher, then the only option that we have is to scale up.
Okay.
But I think in a real world, we are not authorized to change the plans, right?
That's very well said. That's true. We are not authorized to change the plan. Because when you change the plan, you're directly impacting the cost. You're directly taking
Yes.
the cost to, into two. So in the real time environment, you're not really authorized to do it. You will have to, kind of talk to your solution architects, or to, let's say, a technical lead or a client who has the
Mm.
permission to tell you that, what, I'm okay with you increasing my cost. So if
Okay.
they tell it's okay, then we can go ahead and scale up your application out. So that's the very reason that whenever there will be architecture meetings, right, we discuss on all these things. We understand what is the need from a development team. We ask the developers on what kind of an application are you designing, what is the traffic that you're anticipating, what exactly is the end user, or who is the target audience. So that's the reason what they do firstly is that they run this application on testing environments, see what is the maximum load, understand who are, let's say, the target audience out there, and then design the plan accordingly. Because once I am on a plan, it is not very often that I scale up and down. I can scale out, that is definitely allowed. I can scale out, but scale up and down is something that is not really allowed as such. So you're right in telling that we're not authorized to do it, but in very rare case scenarios, wherein you are really seeing a traffic spike, you do not really accommodate all these things. That's when you can go ahead and scale it out, scale it up, provided if you have the permission to do that. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
So the
Mhm.
yes. So the traffic. the traffic flow is low or the traffic flow is high, is it that we only monitor the traffic flow, or is it that the operations team will let us know about it? I mean,
So
how do we
what
get to
happens
know?
normally? Yeah, no, what happens normally is that there are something called alerts out here, which we need to cover. You can configure alerts. So I'm just giving a very high overview. You can configure alerts based upon a condition, telling that okay, fine, if my memory is like, let's say, going high, I'll say matrices, and I'll say if my CPU time is getting high, like about 70% or something like that, I'll say greater than some total value of about, let's say this is CPU time, but I have another signal called, let's say, CPU called the memory, the average memory working set, and etc. If this goes beyond a point, then I would say that, you know what, give me an alert. So if it goes beyond 1,000 bytes, give me an alert, send me an email, or do something. This is something that I can configure in the alerts. I'm not really going into alerts right now because I'll just take a separate class for it to understand how do you monitor your application and all that stuff. So depending upon the alerts, you can kind of scale it out and you can proactively monitor your application. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Anything else, guys? Okay, if there are no further questions, then I'm going to close the session for today, guys. And sorry, we'll meet tomorrow and we'll discuss more on the app services and all those things out. Okay, guys, thank you and have a great day ahead.